On this episode of EGE Film School, I'm going to tell you why it doesn't matter what film camera you use to make your movie, except for when it does. Coming up next. All right, everybody, thanks for joining me on this episode of EGE Film School. My name's JDV, and I'm your host. Okay, so the topic of this show is why the video camera you pick to make your next movie does not matter, except for when it does matter, and I'll get to that in a second. I started off shooting on film way back in 1994. We made our first film, Deadeye, while me and Warpig were still in film school. There's a link down there, an inscription. The quality is kind of all over the place. So there's some good kung fu stunts in it because we've always been good at doing that because we have a good group of stuntmen. But it was a huge learning process. And back in the time, in 1994, we didn't have the options that we have today, either in editing systems or in cameras or really in lenses. There's a huge amount of lenses and cameras that have come out in the last 10 years that help the independent filmmaker get going. So what do I mean when it doesn't matter what camera you use? Well, that film was the only movie that we completed shooting 16. Now, I shot a bunch of test footage for what was going to be our next movie. It was going to be a zombie film well before Walking Dead or 28 Days Later ever came out. You can see some of the footage right now, and it looks okay, but it just wasn't sharp enough. I wanted it something to be more crisp, to kind of pop off the screen. I really wanted it to look better than I could make 16 millimeter film. And we had a good camera. We had an Arriflex S, very professional camera. I think we paid $7,000 for it. You can still pick them up, I think, on eBay for probably right around that amount of money. But we just never could get the really eye-popping quality that I want to, considering how expensive it was to shoot on film. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. And then I saw a movie called The Last Broadcast. Now, this is kind of the film that came out before the Blair Witch Project, and it definitely inspired the guys who made the Blair Witch Project. It's nowhere near as good as the Blair Witch Project, but the thing that caught my eye when I saw this movie was the video quality of it. It didn't look like film, to be sure, nowhere near as good as film, but it was really the first time that I thought, man, video cameras are starting to approach film-like quality. And to be honest, and I had just shot an hour's worth of test footage, a huge amount of footage on 16. I had my cast. I think we were trying to shoot like a long-form trailer, like something that I would cut down to 20 minutes to get more investors for. And to me, The Last Broadcast was blowing what I had shot on 16 millimeter film, developed in Los Angeles, transferred there, I spent a lot of money, in Hollywood getting this film developed and everything. And it didn't look as good as what these guys were getting off of essentially a Handycam from Sony. I think it was the VX1000. And so that really opened up my eyes. I thought, oh man, you can shoot a movie on a video camera. Now that might seem silly today in 2019 or whenever you're watching it. I'm shooting right now in October, but at the time, in the late 90s, it was really a kind of a revolution. And so flash forward to now, and you can get everything from, now in the Blackmagic, you can shoot, I believe, in 6K. I think even the GH5 can shoot in 5K in certain anamorphic modes. So there are, for $2,000 and less, you can shoot in 4K. You can shoot in 1080p all day long. If you don't know what those terms are, don't worry about it. There's really two choices right now in shooting your movie. It's 1080p or shooting in 4K. You can definitely shoot something in 1080 and get it distributed. You know how I know that? Because our movie Vampireland, which is our biggest hit on YouTube, we shot at 720p. When we shot that film, we shot it on a JVC GYU100, which at the time was, without a doubt, the best camera that we could afford at that price point. I thought it actually it looked better than a lot of other cameras that are from that time period, like the Panasonic DVX 100, which had people love that camera. I never thought that camera looked terribly good, and this JVC looks pretty good. When I look at the footage from Vampireland, even now, I mean, even if you hate the movie, the quality of the images actually still pretty good, and it was only shot in 720. And I had that thing premiered at a movie theater, big 200-foot screen and all that, and it looked shockingly good. And I'm talking, not our own abilities or anything. I'm just talking about the camera's ability to resolve a big picture on a big screen, for an amount of money that wasn't crazy, and it looked pretty good. So if you can get a 1080 camera like this camera here, this is the Sony VG20. We shot our fifth movie, Five Must Die, primarily using this camera. We also used a Sony A7S II, but oddly enough, there was a lot of banding sometimes when fog and stuff would come into that. A movie that we shot with this Handycam that I think we paid $1,200 new for, that you can get probably for $350 or $400 now, looks really good, shockingly good. You can put on you can remove the lens. Bam! It's really kind of a unique camera, the VG series, because it's a Handycam setup and a prosumer type controls and everything. But you can put on a $5,000 piece of glass on the end of this. And I guess that's really where this thing is going, is whatever camera you use, it should be something that you can afford, so that you can still afford to get your editing system, feed your cast, pay the electric bills, because having your editing system on, 18 hours a day as you're hacking your movie together costs a lot of money. Money is always going to be a factor in making your full-length independent film. And my kind of hero in this is Robert Rodriguez, who is a genius for not spending money. I'll link to his 10-minute film school down below. But essentially his theory is this: don't spend the money, any money that you don't have to. So like when he has El Mariachi's carrying, his guitar and a gun and a guitar, he only spray painted half of the guitar case because you only see half of it. Little gimmicks like that. He had a genius idea, because he shot El Mariachi, strangely enough, on an Arriflex S2, which is louder than hell. For Deadeye, we had a huge, 200-pound blimp, which is like this huge metal, it's like a submarine that you would stick your camera into that would contain the sound. But even still, we'd have to throw blankets and coats on it, and just a nightmare. But what Rodriguez would do is he'd shoot the scene, and then he'd have the actors say their lines exactly the way they did it before, just into a tape recorder. And then he'd just sync that up. And it works beautifully. I wish I had thought of that when I was shooting Deadeye. I would have made it a million times easier. So the one thing that I would say about your camera is, if it's 1080, if it's 4K, you want a camera that you can kind of grow into, a camera that you are comfortable with, something that you personally like the look of, but something that you like the interface of, you like the lenses that you can get for the camera. It's got to be something that you have to be, you really do have to be comfortable with it, because you're going to be living with that camera for the entire length of the movie. And I would just tell you, depending on how much money you have up front, that can be as long as 2 years. Five Must Die took longer than that to shoot for a whole variety of reasons, and the camera still held up throughout. It's a little beat up, the little things, knocked over to the side, and it's nothing that I'd want to try to sell. No one give me any money for it, but I still use this camera today for B-roll. I still use it sometimes for the shows for YouTube. It's still a viable camera that right now, if you put a gun to my head and say, you got to make a movie with this camera, I'd go, okay. The thing that shooting in 4K really lets you do, it gives you more flexibility in post. So let's say you shoot a two-shot, blah, 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 blah. And let's just say you don't really need this person, you just want this person. Well, shooting in 4K lets you zoom in with your editing program, and you really don't lose that much quality. So that's the one benefit for sure of shooting in 4K, is it gives you some flexibility in post. And depending on what bit rate you're shooting at, you might be able to push the image around in terms of color correction and things like that. There is one other benefit, and it's really the only real reason I can tell you that you probably should try to shoot in 4K if you have the wherewithal to have the computer, be able to store more footage and have the memory cards in your camera. You're going to need more of them, or bigger and faster. And 4K does this. It helps future-proof your movie. We sold Five Must Die to a distributor, and he told me point blank, whatever your movie you do next, if you can shoot 4K, shoot it in 4K, because distributors are starting to want to have it in 4K. Even if they know it's only going to be a 1080 product, just the companies now, the distributors are aware of 4K, and they know that people might want it, and it's caught on in a way that 3D didn't. After Avatar, everyone, that was going to be the big thing. You have to shoot 3D. Your cameras have to be 3D. If you're not shooting 3D, you're nuts. Well, that fell flat on its face. 4K hasn't. Now, I do not think that 8K is going to catch on in terms of consumer level. I don't think 6K is. I mean, heck, a lot of people still don't even have 4K TVs. I don't. In the editing suite, but in terms of my main TV, no, it's not 4K. So I think 4K is probably enough to get you through the next 10 years cycle of film sales, where 1080, maybe it doesn't. Again, if you're just distributing it on YouTube or that kind of thing, it doesn't really matter at all. Then just shoot on whatever camera you have. You have a Canon Rebel T2i, and you love that, and you got it for $100 from your friend with a couple of good lenses like a Nifty 50 and something else. Hey, go to town on it. But if you're going to try to make a full-length film that you are going to try to distribute professionally, you probably should shoot 4K. In terms of what kind of camera I'd recommend, I'll come back to that in a second. Okay, so what camera would I recommend an aspiring filmmaker who's wanting to make a full-length film buy right now? Well, if you're buying a new camera in 2019, the reality is that you're going to get incredibly good picture quality from that camera, especially when compared to a 16mm film, 8mm film, compared to any video camera from even 5 or 6 years ago. You're going to be getting outstanding video quality. But I would say for me, the Micro Four Thirds cameras are the ones that I pick right now, even though, again, I've shot on film, I've shot on full frame cameras, Super 35. There's not a whole lot of cameras I haven't shot with, but I keep coming back to Micro Four Thirds cameras. And I think the reason why is they just work. They're tough as nails. The Olympus OM-D Mark II, I think that's what it's called, and the Panasonic GH5, they're kind of contemporary cameras. They're both about 2.5 years old. You can pick up a used Olympus for like $1,000 at B&H or on eBay. You can get a used GH5 for $1,300. That's an insane amount of quality out of those cameras for that kind of money. And it doesn't really matter what camera you have. It matters about the movie you have at the end of it and getting that film in the can. Okay, so we're going to keep doing a series of shorts where I try to get you guys just a little bit of insight from my now quarter-century long career. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, any insights yourself, please comment below. Please like, subscribe, and share. Love each other. Until the next time, mwah! Thanks for watching. Be sure to visit EvilGeniusEntertainment.com for exclusive content, swag, casting call news, and much, much more.